transparency. We film Facebook Live just about everything. Because one, we believe in transparency, but two, it allows people to like be involved in the campaign who can't be here. And part of that transparency also is that everybody knows what I'm saying to everybody, and so they know I'm not saying different things to different groups, and this is really, really important. And I'll start out, well, I guess you probably want to know some things about me. So I'm originally from Arkansas. I was born and raised in Arkansas. My family's from Arkansas and Oklahoma and Georgia. And I moved to Arizona in '98. But in Arkansas, I was the youngest of 4 girls. My mom divorced my dad when I was 2. So she raised me as a single parent. She tried to get child support, and there was no child support enforcement. But first of all, the sheriff's department wouldn't even serve my dad to get child support, because in the 70s, you know, if you were a good wife, you wouldn't need to steal money from your husband. So she actually went and joined the law enforcement and became a deputy sheriff, so she could serve my dad. She was one of the first women to join law enforcement in Arkansas at the time, and then she couldn't get paid still because there was no child support enforcement. So she advocated with other parents, and they really forced the state to come up with a child support enforcement department, the first of its kind in Arkansas at the time. And then she always worked 3 or 4 jobs, or 2 or 3 jobs my whole life. She also was a federal marshal, and then she became a federal investigator. She worked for the Public Defender's Office as a federal investigator when the Oklahoma City bombing happened. So she actually had to go and meet Timothy McVeigh in prison as he was waiting for his appeal, and question him, get information from him, and then had to go to the white supremacist groups in northern Arkansas to talk to them and get information from them. And so the things that I learned, because this was my dinner time conversation, was number 1, that they existed. Number 2, that white supremacy was actually a rebranding at that time. That was the first time the white supremacist label was ever used in large numbers. And also that they were a fringe group. That they existed, and this is what they believed, but everybody else just kind of ignored them as, you know, the embarrassing uncle in the north. In '98, she had to go to a conference here in Arizona, and I came with her because I had some vacation time that I was going to lose if I didn't use it. So I came out to Arizona and absolutely fell in love and decided this is where I wanted to live. So I went back to Arkansas, gave a 3-month notice, packed my car, whatever didn't fit my car didn't get to come, and I drove across country to Arizona, where I did not know one person, didn't have a place to live, and didn't have a job. And figured all those things out. I got here on a Wednesday, had a job and apartment by Friday, couldn't start my jobs or my apartment until Monday, so I went to Tijuana for the weekend because I'd never been there either. Then, you know, I fell into civil rights work. I started working in nonprofits, civil rights, social justice, traveling all over the state, bringing marginalized groups together to work on especially discrimination in the workplace, in the school systems, and in government. And then I had an issue with Arpaio's jails. So I had a meeting with some of Arpaio's people about a discrimination case. And when I went in to talk about this issue, we were chit-chatting, and the chaplain said, we don't like to accommodate for people who practice Wicca. And I said, why? And he said, well, that's not a religion, you know that. And I said, no, actually, I don't know that. What I know is that your job is to see if you can reasonably accommodate a religious request. Whether something's a religion is so above your pay grade, it's unbelievable. And so then we got to my case, and I laid out all of the information I had. I had the federal law, the state law, I had every policy for every jail and prison system in the state of Arizona that said that this is indeed a religious accommodation, and this is how you accommodate it. And as I'm spreading it out, they said, I'm sorry, you're confused. And I said, why? And they said, well, it's not that we don't know the law, it's that we're not going to follow the law. And if you don't like it, you can sue. So I packed up my stuff. By the way, the girl that was in jail wanting the accommodation, she wasn't even convicted. She was not able to post bond or bail. And so she was stuck in jail waiting for trial. And so I took the case to the ACLU, and they took it, and they did win it. But in the meantime, I went to my husband and I said, it's time for me to go to law school. I actually got this a lot. In school systems, when I would go in and talk about discrimination that was going on in the school, they would literally tell me that the kids needed to have thicker skins in this day and age. A quick story, I'd gone to a school on the east side, and it was a Muslim in this case, and the child, it was Ramadan, so the child was just practicing Ramadan, fasting. And the other kids were picking on this child. It was after September 11th, so, a couple of years after September 11th, but they were saying that the child was a terrorist and all this stuff. And so the mom had asked the teacher if she could just come in and give a presentation just to the class where her child was, and just give a presentation of what Ramadan was. That's it. And the teacher said no, the principal said no, so I went in and met with the principal, and we're having this conversation. I said, it's not like I'm with the civil rights organization and I want to come in and give diversity training to the kids. This is the parent of one of the children in your classroom who's being picked on, wants to come in and just, make this normal for them, explain it to them, answer their questions. And she said, we can't do this. By the way, it was Christmas. She said, we can't do this because, that's religion, and that's mixing religion with school, and we can't do that. And she said, the Muslim kids in this day and age just need to have a thicker skin. It's the reality they live in is that everybody thinks that Muslims are terrorists, and the kids just need to deal with it. And so I said, she said, we can't have religion in the school. And I said, we literally walked through the lobby, and you have Christmas trees and menorahs. And she said, those are cultural. I said, oh, then we don't have a problem, because Ramadan's cultural too. People who don't even practice their religion still fast. And she said, no, we can't do that. I mean, if we had to do all this, different religions in the schools and explain, different kids' cultures, next you'll be asking that we do the Native Americans. And I was like, actually, we live on a Native American land, so it's not a bad idea. But this is the kind of stuff, that was really going on. So I told my husband I need to go to law school, and I did. And I decided to open up my own law firm in Scottsdale, and I decided to do estate planning because I really liked the idea of helping people plan what to do with their stuff after they're dead so that their kids don't kill each other after they're dead. But I had worked so long with different immigrant groups that I had a reputation, and so I kept getting referrals for immigration, so that's how I ended up doing immigration and estate planning. Two things that don't normally go together. Got them coming and going. And then I also tried to do civil rights on the side. The problem with that was once you have the attorney card, nobody wants to meet with you and have a win-win conversation. They're all like, getting the wagons together, waiting for you to sue. So I had to help civil rights organizations in the background and tell them how to go in and negotiate instead of it being out there myself, which was disappointing. Kind of made you think, maybe I shouldn't have gone to law school. It was hard. But then in 2016, I became really upset because of what I was seeing. It wasn't just at the presidential level. I know people bring it up that that's what it was, and it really wasn't. It was a catalyst. On the presidential level, we were definitely hearing that groups being disparaged. We were hearing words by someone that wanted to represent the country that we hadn't heard a person representing the country in a long time use this language, and particularly about people they're supposed to be serving. And that was upsetting. But what's more upsetting was that it was filtering down into other elections. So people in other offices were starting to repeat this rhetoric. And if that wasn't upsetting enough, the most upsetting to me was that their colleagues were silent. So all we had was this negative language. We didn't have a lot of pushback saying, no, this is not acceptable. You are not going to say this about people that I represent. Or people like me, or people I know, or my neighbors, or anything. And this was new, because after September 11th, you also had, Representative King was very famous, not just for the Muslims, but all kinds of groups, disparaging them. He called for the internment of Muslims after September 11th. He called for the bombing of Mecca after September 11th. But you had his colleagues pushing back and saying, no, that's not okay. President Bush was pushing back and saying, no, this is not okay. In 2016, I didn't see this, and that's what was very upsetting. And while after September 11th, Muslims did have a lot of negative consequences that was happening, the Latino population actually got it a lot harder than Muslims. I mean, we got, you know, people thinking whoever was a Muslim and wanting to kill them, like, you know, Mr. Sodi Singh in Mesa, who wasn't even Muslim. We got, you know, attacks, physical attacks, we got spit and words and all these things. But Latino population, they got laws. They got SB 10-7. They got these kinds of things going on that affected them on a far broader scale than just people being not nice to us or in the grocery store, or even the FBI wanting to fingerprint and question everybody that was Muslim. The other thing that upset me was I was part of the empty chair town halls for Flake. And basically I saw that we had 2 US senators who we never saw. And everybody was upset about it. It wasn't just Democrats, everybody. Everybody was upset that they couldn't meet with their representatives. They couldn't have town halls, they couldn't question them. You know, they weren't explaining their votes. And so I turned to my husband in October of 2016 and I said, it doesn't matter who wins this election, the damage is already done. I've got to figure out how I can go out and raise the conversations that need to be had. White supremacists, I was taught, I learned very early that they were a fringe group. They now had equal sitting within the marketplace of ideas of everybody else. It was not unusual for someone to proudly say they were a white supremacist who was in the government, and that was okay now. It was, you know, the disparaging of different populations. I mean, these things were going on, and we needed to have a conversation about it. So I told my husband I need to close my law firm, and he said, well, what are you going to do? I said, I don't know, but it's going to be big. I got to figure it out, and I got to be ready. So I got to not have clients in the pipeline, so I need to stop taking clients now. And then I spent some months thinking about, you know, what do I want to do? And I decided to run for office. I had been told over the years, as women are, you know, it takes us like 10 times of being told we should run for office before we'll say yes. And I always said, no, it's not my bag. I'm the one that holds politicians accountable, and I'm really good at my job. But I'd always told marginalized communities that there's only so much you can do from the outside. Sometimes you have to get into the institutions and change the culture from the inside. So I thought, well, maybe that's what I should do. And I looked at the different offices, and I decided I wanted to run for US Senate because I wanted a statewide office, because I wanted to travel the state so that I could really, truly have those conversations. And of all the offices that were statewide, the one I was most qualified for and passionate about was US Senate. It's Flake, it was an incumbent, you know. I wasn't worried about the uphill battle. I was worried about how could I demonstrate a clear distinction between Flake and myself. And by doing that, it would be traveling the state like a crazy person, which is what I did from day one. I have over 46,000 miles on my car since April 2017 when I announced. I've spoken to people in every county, visited most of the counties more than once, a lot of the cities more than once. I wanted to have open events, no pay to play, no exclusion, put all events on my website and on my Facebook so that anybody could find out where I was at any time, so they could come and question me and actually be open to answering the questions. I wanted to have the most detailed website, and I wanted to have the issues really explained, where I stood and why I stood there. And I wanted to be the opposite of a milquetoast that I could get, because my belief is that the way to get people to vote is by exciting them. And the way you excite them is speaking to their values and standing up strong. And I want to tell you a story because it just happened yesterday. So Sunday I was in Bullhead City and Kingman. And then Monday night I was in Lake Havasu. And Lake Havasu, so we were at Kingman. Let me tell you another story. We went last year, right after I announced, we went to Mojave County Fair, which is Kingman. And if you know anything about Oklahoma City, Timothy McVeigh actually visited Kingman before he went to Oklahoma City. There's a lot of white supremacy there, and a lot of nationalist groups and all kinds of different labels. But they're very strong in their belief system. And and so we went to the Mojave County Fair, The Democrats literally, they were like, you need to hire security and bring security. We were like, no, we're good. I got this. It's like going home to Arkansas. And so we get to the Mojave County Fair, and we get out of the car, and there's a U.S. flag, a Confederate flag, a U.S. flag, a Confederate flag, U.S. flag, Confederate flag, all the way around. And there are trucks coming in, pickup trucks, and their Confederate flags are bigger than their trucks. And we're like, okay, this is going to be fun. So we go in, and the Democrats are sitting behind the table, and they're like, basically we just kind of stand behind the table, and if people want to talk to us, they come up and talk to us, and maybe ask people if they want to register to vote. And sometimes people yell at us, spit at us, Sometimes they're not nice. I'm like, no, that ends today. No, we're the cool kids. We're going to change this. So we went out to the fair. We didn't stay by the table. We went out to the fair, and we started meeting people and talking to people and having a good time, and literally brought people from outside in the fair in to meet the Democrats because they were local and they should know their neighbors. And we energized Mojave County like they've never been energized before. The Kingman Democrats, or the Mojave County Democrats there in Kingman, they were so excited. They called us the next day, and they were like, can you come back? We've never been so happy and proud and energized to be Democrats in Mojave County in our life. We need you to come back. So we came back after 2 or 3 days and spoke to a larger group and really talked to them about, we need to come out of the closet. We need to stand on our values and be proud. We should be able to talk about our values, not beat people over the heads with them, but be proud of them. And so, like Havasu, yesterday, we went to an event, and it was a Chamber of Commerce forum, and for meet different candidates, and it was from U.S. Senate all the way down to like dog catcher. There was all kinds of races. And I was the only Democratic candidate there from any race.
Wow.
We knew what we were getting into. We go in, and this was not a friendly crowd. And that's what we've done from the beginning. We have not worried about just going to the Democrats, just going to the base, just going to the people who like us, but actually going everywhere. I go to Ray's, another story, great stories, but I'm not going to keep you all day. We go wherever people are, and we went in, and we just talked to people like neighbors, because that's what we are in the end. And some people everybody was polite. And I consider even people who avoid me to be polite. But we just had normal conversations with people. They weren't overly friendly. They didn't really know what to do with us. And then we got on stage, and I shared a stage with Kelly Ward. She was the only Republican U.S. Senate candidate that showed up too. And you have to know that Mojave is her county. And Lake Havasu, when we were in Kingman and Bullhead City, we saw some Democrat signs. We didn't see any in Lake Havasu at all, not even for city council. Nobody, and we drove for like 2 hours. We drove around neighborhoods thinking we'll find a sign somewhere. Not a statewide race, no, nobody. And they have people running in their races who are Democrats, but there weren't any signs. And we got up, and I by the way, I wore blue from head to toe. You knew exactly what my party affiliation was. There was all the way. I had shoes, I had platforms, and they were blue too. And had no other color. And we got up, and they let us have 2 questions. And the first question was the veterans, and I answered that one. And then the second question they asked Kelly was the wall. And I was ready to talk about the wall, and they were like, oh, we already know your answer for the wall, so we want you to answer something else, which was, in general, how do you fix immigration? And I talked about kids in cages. They were mad. They were upset. But the first thing I did, I got up, I said, I'm Deedra, I'm running for U.S. Senate as a Democrat. I was the most proud Democrat they'd probably ever seen. But after I got off the stage, and we stayed to the end, it's the hottest place I've ever been in my life. The candidates were drenched. The people in the audience were drenched. I don't know what they're doing, but they said it's like that every year. And it was standing room only. It was the crowded place. And everybody stayed to the end. But when we got off the stage, for the rest of the time, people were coming up and thanking me for and tell me they had respect for me for showing up. Because no other Democrat had showed up, and no other Democrat had ever showed up for these events. And they even told me that I had made them think about some things differently, that they had never heard things put differently than the way they put things. And that is really why I got into this race, because that's those conversations that I was talking about. Because talking to your friendlies, we're going to argue over minutia, and we do. But we're going to generally say we should have health care. I mean, we're going to debate over whether we should have health care for all or have some kind of a fix. I personally, health care for all. Every industrialized country in the world has figured it out. We can too. But you know, we'll argue over what kind of health care, but we're all going to agree on health care. When you go to people who aren't as friendly, they're not hearing our conversations. We can never convince them that our solutions are viable, that our solutions are credible, that our solutions could actually keep them from dying because they can't afford their health care, if we're not ever actually talking to them. That's really how it has to be. The other things that I talk about are education. It's an infrastructure issue, just like we need roads and bridges and internet and all these other things to make our life go around. We need education, and if we continue to deliberately defund our education, we will become a failed state. And there's dilapidated books, by the way, that you can go look that up. It's true. Net neutrality, I started running on it in April 2017, before people even knew what it was at the end of the last year. It is absolutely a freedom issue. If we do not allow data, if we don't keep data equal, to be treated equally, then we don't get all the data. If we allow corporations, relationships with corporations to decide what data we get, or what data comes to the surface quicker, then someone else is controlling our ability to even research. And the people who are hurt most, other than consumers, are nonprofits, small businesses, people who can't afford to have those relationships with those corporations to get their stuff up front. But more importantly, it's like a utility. If you don't have cell phone and internet access, cell phone, you can't call 911. I have truly experienced this. I have 2 cell phones that I travel all over Arizona with on 2 different service providers. And there are places in Arizona I don't have service. And people live there. They don't have service ever. Another funny story about Navajo, we literally had to use Google Maps, Google Earth, to pinpoint a building because they don't have addresses, and had to get me GPS coordinates to get me there, to go on the Navajo Nation to go and talk to these people, which we did. But I didn't have cell service the whole time there, so I had to put the coordinates in before I left. And if I got off my phone, or if I did anything, then I lost the map. This is their livelihood. Without internet, you can't look for a job, you can't post a job, you can't run a small business these days. You can't do schoolwork. The Thonal Nation in the South, cells, they have dial-up. That's all they have is dial-up. Most people don't have home phones, so they don't have it at home at all because they don't have a home phone. You can't get dial-up without a home phone. But their schools, the internet's so slow, they can't even do the state testing. So they worked out a deal. Verizon decided they can't afford it, but Verizon decided to give them faster internet just for the school, just so they could do the state testing. Doesn't help homework or anything else, but I got they can get those tests done now. These were the kind of things, I mean, this is livelihood. You can't improve your life without they're basically utilities at this point. Some people, young people, cell phone and internet's more important than food. And then also is the separation of religion and state. This is an absolutely important issue. Every single attack on women's sexual freedom and every single attack on the LGBTQ community is because someone's trying to put their religion into law, their interpretation of their religion into law. And if there is a wall that needs to be built, that's the wall. Nobody has religious liberty unless everybody has religious liberty. And that includes people who don't want religion. And this has to be one of the founding structures of any government. And when people ask me, they were like, I actually do have some people say, no, our country wasn't founded on separation of religion and state. We're a Christian country. I'm like, okay. So you want to live under a theocracy? That's what you're telling me. Because I don't want to live on a theocracy. I don't even care if it's my interpretation of a theocracy. I don't want to live on one. And if you think that all Christians agree on one theology, that you're going to have to live on that, you need to seriously go talk to some Christians who don't go to your own church. Because the theocracy is scary. And I don't want to live under it. I don't care what it's called. I want everybody to be able to do whatever they want. The government needs to get out of the business of God. They have no place in the business of God. No business in the relationship that anybody wants to have with God or not. And then also I have signed candidates for the contract, and that I will not take any corporate special interest or PAC money ever. If you're not human, you can't donate to me. And that I will work to overturn Citizens United. There are two ways of doing it. As an attorney, I'll tell you there's two ways of doing it. One is a constitutional amendment. And I've already signed on to Move to Amend, which is a whole movement trying to get different people in Congress to sign on and do this constitutional amendment. And that would be great, except that we already have the ERA that we still haven't gotten passed. So I'm not going to put all my eggs in one basket on a constitutional amendment. I'm all for it, but I got another way. The other way is just to simply read the Citizens United case itself. If you look at the dissent opinion, the justice said, okay, if donating money to campaigns is free speech or speech, then we can also limit it for corporations and require transparency for corporations like we already do for humans. Because Supreme Court cases already said that the government can limit and require transparency for humans. That's already settled law from the Supreme Court. So if you can limit humans and you can require humans to be transparent, then you can do the same thing for corporations, and it says so in the case. So the fact that it says so in the case, the Supreme Court already said, this sounds good to me. The only reason it hasn't been done is because there's not motivation to do it. But it can be done. It has to be done. 97% of all people in the United States, regardless of political party, want the money out of politics. 97%. 93% believe it can't be done. So the 97% is good. 93% we need to work on it. But this is a movement. Before this year, nobody was really talking about it. No candidates were. Now, not only did I sign candidates with the contract, but people signed it all over the country. Candidates all over the country. We had, just in Arizona, it was me, Brianna Westbrook, when she was running for Congress, and Billy Kovacs all signed this contract in Arizona. That's just in Arizona. All over the country they have this. Then you had 7 people who are in Congress right now who are running for re-election this year who also said they're not going to take that money. Grijalva is one of them. I'm endorsed by Justice Democrats. In order to be endorsed by Justice Democrats, you have to also agree that you're not going to take that money. You can't even get the endorsement if you don't make that agreement. So that's a movement that it's starting to grow and happen. Because the first thing that people say is, well, without all that money, without all that dark and dirty money, which by the way, we also have the other movement, outlaw dirty money here in Arizona, we got it on the ballot. So obviously Arizona thinks this is important too. It was bipartisan. It wasn't the Democrats. This was a bipartisan effort. So another part of the movement. But people say, well, how can you win if you don't take this money? And also, the other side's going to take this money, so you're just shooting yourself in the foot. Number one, I'll tell you, Democrats always say that we're always out fundraised. So the fact that they're going to take that money and we're not, we're already in the same boat that we were already in. The reason why we don't have as much money is because Democrats have a lot of interest and we're donating everywhere. We're trying to save our neighbors, nonprofits, this kind of coalition, that kind of coalition, initiatives. I mean, we're everywhere. Our money is just spread all over the place. So it's not that Democrats don't have money. We got money, but we have lots of priorities. But how do you win without that money? In my opinion, and this is the way I've been running my race, number one is efficiency. Put the money where it matters. Not just doing things that cost a lot of money. The traditional route is that, and it's a requirement, by the way, 3/4 of your money has to go to television and radio and print ads. 3/4 of your money. The only thing that agreement does is make sure that everybody who sells ads is making a lot of money. because hardly anybody really is watching TV anymore, and if they are, they're definitely not watching ads for fun. And nobody's really paying attention to the ads. Even the print ads. I was actually talking to a reporter, and I said, yeah, people skip the print ads. And she was like, oh yeah, the print ads, everybody skips them. Even online print ads, they're skipping them. They're not paying any, in fact, they make them mad if they show up and they can't skip them. So we started looking at our money on efficiency. How do you use it so that it goes to where it needs to go? That was our second point, was how do you do that? You excite people. I believe that the way you excite people is to speak on our values. One of the things I tell people is, Republicans, they don't compromise on their values. You never see a Republican saying, yeah, I know all the other Republicans are pro-gun and no matter what, but I'm willing to compromise on guns. You never see that. You never see a Republican say, yeah, I know everybody's against abortion, but I can get around that one. You don't see it. They stick to their values. We compromise ourselves into non-existence sometimes. I think that they do so well because you may hate every single thing that they say, but you believe them. And human nature is to go with the person you trust, even if you don't like them. I believe that if we as Democrats, that doesn't mean, as an attorney, I think you can totally stick with your values, your there's a bottom line in negotiation that you already go into the negotiation knowing, I won't go below this line. So you have to figure out what your line is. Everything else can be negotiable. So I can tell you that I believe in health care for all. I can negotiate on what it looks like. I think everybody should be covered, but I'm not married to whether or not it's the Medicare way or the Medicaid way or the Australian way or the German way. I feel like, it's this really good buffet that we could look around and see what us as independent Americans, what would work for us, but that would make sure everybody gets covered. The bottom line is everybody gets covered. The negotiation is how do we do that? That's what we don't do enough of, in my opinion, stick to our values. So I feel like if we go around and we stand up to our values like I did in Lake Havasu, no holds barred, we don't put kids in cages in front of a crowd that I thought were going to have a meltdown when I said kids in cages because they think it's a lie anyway. They couldn't believe I brought that up. But I'm going to say kids in cages instead of keeping families together because keeping families together doesn't have an emotion around it. Kids in cages, that has emotion. And right after I said, which we taped and put on my Facebook because we put everything out, but after I said, the United States of America does not put kids in cages. And they were like, oh, so mad. And then they started talking to each other. I can't believe she said that. And I'm on stage, I can see them. And I said, and we can regulate who comes in our country and still keep our humanity. This is the kind of language that inspires. And that's what we got to start looking at. How do we inspire? I believe that if we inspire, then that's how we get water cooler conversations, phone trees, which is totally old school. Then having a hot social media that excites people, makes them want to share it. That's how you use money efficiently. You excite them, and they help spread it for you. And then you put your money in helping them spread it for you. And you can put your money in other places. If I had $5 million, I might run some ads too. My ads would be like, you don't put kids in cages and we can keep our humanity and still regulate who comes in our country. But, there's different ways of doing things. But I think that we will do better if we would be loud and proud. Not me. By the way, they were extremely nice to me. They even clapped after I finished my speech. They were very polite. But we can really make a difference this way, and that's what we're doing. I mean, this whole thing is really a grassroots people talking to people thing. And by doing that, we've done very well. The only poll that's come out, because this comes out, the only poll that's come out that's actually included my name. So you already know that the polls are skewed since they're not even including all the names. And then, their questions are interesting too. But the only poll that did come out that had my name was 550 people, which I don't know how you can have 550 people that represent anything. We have 7 million people in Arizona. We have over 1 million registered Democrats, over 1 million registered independents. I don't know how 500 people gets that feel. Most polls, by the way, if you look at them, they're only like 2,000 people. So again, who are this? There may have been a time when 2,000 people could be the testing water of a society. I don't think that's where we are anymore, unless you're like 500 people in Maricopa County, maybe. don't know, maybe in a city? But anyway, it was 550 people, 70% landlines. How many in this room have a landline? Yeah. I have a landline. I have a landline. But most people don't have landlines. I did lose. I think Cinema got a little over 50% of the vote. There was almost 30% undecided. And the numbers were, I got 6%. But when you look at the demographics, I totally beat her in 18 to 34-year-olds. Obviously not part of the 70% landlines. There's an undercurrent. There are the people that won't be the polls. Like I said, we went to raves. I've been here for 5 raves. We go to where the people are, and we get them excited. And when I go to gas stations in Podunk country, I have young people recognize me and want to take pictures with me. And this is a big deal. So this is really how we're raising the conversation, raising the expectation of what this office is. And in it to win it, but at the same time, if we don't change the demographics, then this is a one-time win. We gotta have more than a one-time. We gotta have more than one race, number one. Winning this seat's not enough. We gotta win this seat plus, all the way down the ballot. And we also have to lay the groundwork for future. And nobody showing up but me at this Lake Havasu is exactly what we'll not ever plant a seed for any other year. Lake Havasu will continue to hear the same messaging over and over because nobody else is talking. And that's what we got to stop. I'll end it there and have questions. I went way longer, but I had to bring up so many things.